Brought to you by Express Care Health and Skin Center. Get in, get out, get better.
Welcome back to Healthy Living. With the summer coming to a close, thousands of parents are going to be preparing their kids for school, whether you've got a child who'll be starting their first day of school and have anxiety about all that comes with that, or if you realize you've got to get the physicals and vaccinations in order. Express Care's Dr. Jitka Lom joins us in studio with tips on how to get your kids mentally and physically prepared for the new school year and how to stay healthy throughout the year. Some very important tips for our viewers now. So, Doc, as a parent prepares their child or children for school, what are some of the things that should be on their checklist?
Well, like you said, they need their physical, and sometimes they need a shot to be updated or two, a TB skin test. And then after that, we need to prepare them, get their school supplies, and make sure that their uniforms are ready. And then, like you said, mentally prepare them. And getting out of summertime mode into school mode is sometimes a bit of a transition. So you can start thinking about things like doing some reading or some worksheets on math or something like that at home before the school year starts, or at least preparing for their academic material.
Okay. Now, what kind of immunization does every kid need in order to get in school?
Lots of kids need the TB skin test clearance, and then a tetanus shot if they're over age 14, also meningitis vaccine for those older children, and the younger children need their routine childhood immunizations. Usually around age 4 or 5 years of age, they're going to get a whole slew of shots, so prepare for that.
Okay. Now, should every child get a physical, and is it something that's necessary every year?
It's useful every year to see how your child is growing, because we do a growth chart to see, that your child is developing normally. Sometimes there are some concerns you might have, but it's mostly to make sure that the child is growing. And another thing we always pick up is their vision. We check their vision and their hearing. Sometimes there's wax in the ears, other times they need glasses.
Okay. Now, how should parents start prepping for kids? You mentioned a little bit about, their sleep patterns may have changed. During the summer, kids stay up late, sleep all day. So what should parents start doing to transition as school is a couple weeks away now? Might be the best time to start.
It might be the best time to start, especially a couple weeks away, yeah. So making the bedtime, the school bedtime, and then the wake-up time can still be a little later, but the bedtime should be the same. And moving towards less TV and more concentration on tasks that require thinking, such as puzzles or Sudoku or those type of activities rather than the electronics, that would be helpful.
Okay. Now, when we talk about getting kids into a sleep routine, it can be very difficult.
Yes.
So let's talk first based on kids' ages, they all need different amounts of sleep.
Yeah.
What do you recommend?
Yeah, let's start with teenagers. So, teenagers, their whole brain is getting reorganized, rewired. That's why they're so strange sometimes. And they really need 9 hours of sleep. And so if you count back from whatever morning time they need to wake up, their bedtime's going to be that, and they're usually up much later than that. So whatever time they're going to bed now, just go back by half an hour at least every few days. Go back by half an hour from 10:30 to 10 to 9:30 or whatever, and just get them into bed and shut the electronics off and the phone.
What about the younger ones?
The younger ones, right. So little children need about 10 or even 11 hours of sleep, the younger kindergartners, and they may need an afternoon nap. But once they're in the elementary age, 7 or 8 years old, they should get 8 hours of sleep for sure. And again, that means an earlier bedtime for most.
Okay. Now, what kind of talk should parents have? We've done stories in the news. Bullying has been a big problem. And so when we talk about mentally preparing our kids for school, there's a lot that comes with it, from a kid's anxiety from their first day of school going into a classroom setting to maybe your older ones that are going to be dealing with peer pressure and bullying and talking about sex and dealing with different relationships. So what is some advice do you have for parents out there who are going to be dealing with a slew of all these things to try to keep their kids mentally healthy and really prepare them?
You really do need to prepare them, and I think those are great issues. As far as bullying, there's the two sides. There are the bullies that need to be spoken to and the bullied. I guess a good way to start would be just to keep a line of open communication and ask your child, is there anything that's concerning you or anything you're worried about before you start school, and what kind of friendships do you expect to have, and know the kids' names, the children, the friends of your children, know what their names are, and oh, what about such and such, and what's he going to be like this year? And you can sort of plan a strategy, and if your child has been bullied last year, maybe you can recall some of those incidents and ask them how they would handle it this year, of what kind of skills you would like your child to learn. Mostly, it's just so important to keep the line of communication open so that your child knows that no matter what happens at school, they can come home and tell you about it. You won't judge them, you won't yell, you won't shout, you'll just listen, and then you can make a plan together. I think that's really important. As far as mental health, if the child is anxious and being bullied, they're not going to do well in school. They're going to have some real difficulties there. So take care of that.
And what do you recommend for maybe the teens out there? I think everyone, when you go through high school, you deal with peer pressure. That's when they normally get introduced to smoking and alcohol, sex, relationships, peer pressure.
Yeah.
How do you?
I think communicating your family's values is really critical. So starting the conversation with, in our family, this is what we expect. And then going from there to say, in the world you may encounter many people who have different values than in our family. But if you take it back to your family, your child will always have that base. And explaining about temptation, explaining about all the different things that they may be facing, and again, asking them to verbalize, what would you do if somebody offered you a cigarette, or what would you do if somebody offered you drugs, what would you do then? And so that they can be prepared and that they can have a strategy. As far as sex and alcohol, those things happen when there's inadequate supervision a lot of the time. You need to know where your children are and who they're with. Roaming the mall is often not such a great idea. Parties, in hotels or in people's homes when there's no adults around, that's just not going to work out well for the teenager. So communicating your expectations. And if you suspect that your child is already into any of that, then you need to also face it. So go get a drug test, then you can confront your child, talk to them about sex and about their activities that way. And if they're already sexually active, I believe that the girls really should get on birth control so that at least we don't go on and have a teen pregnancy. So there's a lot to discuss, and it's challenging for parents for sure.
Definitely raising a kid these days is a lot different
than And I guess you should
ago.
also be careful with the cell phones too, and the sexting and the different messages that can be going around, bullying on the cell phones, and be aware of what your child's up to on that.
Okay, one last question before we're going to throw it a break is books are getting a lot heavier, and so what should people or parents look out for when they're buying backpacks for their kids? Should they get shoulder bags?
Yeah. Take a look at your child's back. Ask them to bend forward and just look at their spine. You'll be amazed how many children have a hunch, especially on their right side, big muscle on the right side because they're carrying a heavy shoulder bag. And there's actually national guidelines that say that your backpack should not weigh more than 10% of your body weight. So if you're a 100-pound child, you should be having a 10-pound backpack, and of course our children's backpacks are much, much heavier than that a lot of the time. So that carrying heavy things all the time will distort your back. It will give you posture problems and low back problems later on in life. So it's really important to reduce that. If possible, divide the books into 2 bags, or at least carry the backpack straight on your back rather than on one shoulder. And then in addition, the roller bags would really be much better for you.
And these days, I think the roller bags are just so much easier.
They are.
Those books are really heavy these days.
They're very heavy. And if possible, if some photocopies can be made, or at least if the kids can do their work at school, not drag the books back and forth, it's better as well.
All right, Doc, we will continue our discussion, on the best tips to prepare your kids for the upcoming school year. Healthy Living returns right after this timeout.